I used to think fear was beautiful. That was my problem. Fear, to me, had always been cinematic, something framed in shadows and timed jump scares, edited down to perfection. I grew up dissecting slasher films like textbooks, memorizing kill counts the way other kids memorized baseball stats. Blood was symbolism. Screams were performance. Violence, when packaged right, was art. That belief followed me all the way to Markov's haunted forest. The night I first arrived, October air clung to my lungs like damp fabric. The forest stretched across 40 acres of twisted oak and pine, fenced off from the road by a rusted iron gate that screamed every time it opened. Above it hung the sign, Markov's haunted forest, you won't leave the same. I smiled when I read it. Taglines always made me smile. My cousin Dale ran the attraction. He liked to call it immersive horror, like that justified everything. Actors hid in the trees, elaborate animatronics lunged from brush, and carefully plotted trails ensured maximum panic without actual danger. That was the promise, anyway. Customers want to feel hunted, Dale told me when he hired me. But they want to walk out alive. I nodded, already imagining how the place would look on film. Fog machines drifting like ghosts. Strobe lights flashing between branches. Masks half glimpsed, never fully seen. It was a dream for someone like me. Someone who loved fear from a safe distance. The forest didn't feel safe, though. Not even then. As soon as I stepped past the gate, something shifted. The trees seemed closer together than they should have been, their branches interlocking overhead like ribs. The ground dipped unevenly, roots coiling beneath the dirt like veins. Somewhere deep inside the woods, something creaked, not metal, not wood. Something organic. I told myself it was sound design. That's what I always did. Explain discomfort away. New guy, right? The voice came from my left. A tall figure emerged from behind a tree, mask pushed up onto his head. Jacko. Everyone knew Jacko. He was one of the senior scare actors, famous for his improvisation. He wore a stitched burlap mask with a grin too wide to be human. Zach, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was rough, calloused. Cold. First rule, Jacko said, lowering his voice. Don't trust the forest. I laughed. You say that to all the newbies? No, he said flatly. Just the ones who look like they think this place is a movie. That wiped the smile off my face. Before I could respond, a horn sounded, low and mournful. Opening signal. The forest came alive. Hidden speakers whispered. Lights flickered. Actors scattered into position, melting into darkness like ink in water. Jacko pulled his mask back down. Stay on your path, he said. If you hear someone crying for help off trail, no, you didn't. He vanished before I could ask what he meant. My assignment that night was simple, trail monitor. I stood near checkpoint C, dressed as a ranger with a fake shotgun, meant to herd guests forward if they froze or panicked. The first group entered laughing, already screaming at shadows. Couples clung to each other. Phones shook in their hands. Everything went exactly as planned. Too perfectly. The scares landed harder than I expected. People didn't just scream, they sobbed. One woman dropped to her knees, begging me to make it stop. I thought she was acting until I saw urine soaking into the dirt beneath her. Still, I told myself, immersive horror. Then I heard the screaming. Not the theatrical kind. Not the rehearsed kind. It came from deeper in the woods, off-path. Raw. Wet. A sound torn straight from a throat. The guests froze. One guy laughed nervously. Wow, you guys really upped your game. I didn't laugh. The screen cut off suddenly, like a wire pulled tight and snapped. I radioed Dale. You running something new out there? Static. Then, stick to your zone, Zach. I swallowed and forced a grin for the guests, waving them forward. My heart was pounding harder than it ever had during any movie marathon. Later, during break, I found Jacko sitting on a fallen log, mask beside him. He was staring into the woods, jaw clenched. You hear that? I asked. He nodded once. Forrest's been hungry lately. I waited for the punchline. It never came. What do you mean? I asked. Jacko looked at me then, really looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion. I mean, he said quietly, something out here doesn't know it's supposed to pretend. A cold crawled up my spine. That night, after closing, we did a head count. One actor was missing. Dale brushed it off, said the guy probably bailed early. But the next morning, the police arrived. They found Jacko hanging from a tree near Checkpoint D. Except no rope had been used. His body was twisted into the branches, limbs bent the wrong way, mouth frozen in a scream that looked nothing like performance. His burlap mask had been nailed to his face. And carved into his chest, deep enough to split bone, were 3 words. This is real. That was the moment I realized something fundamental had changed. Fear was no longer beautiful. And the forest wasn't acting anymore. They closed the forest for one night. Just one. That should have told me everything. Police tape wrapped the gate like a flimsy apology, yellow against rusted iron. Patrol cars idled at the edge of the road, lights off, engines humming as if even they didn't want to draw attention. Dale stood with the officers, arms crossed, face tight. They called it a breakdown. Not grieving, not shocked. That word followed me everywhere. Calculating, whispered by nurses. Jacko's body had been removed before sunrise. Gently by doctors who never met my eyes. No headlines. Stress reaction. Just rumors already spreading through town like mold. Trauma-induced delusion. Freak accident. They wrapped Dale what happened in language designed to make it smaller, safer. Guy something that could be medicated and monitored. Panicked. I let them. Fell. Because if I told the branches that the forest was real, asked that it was learning, with his mask nailed to his face, they would have called it Dale's something worse. Eyes hardened. You want this job or observation, Zach? White walls. That was the first time fear twisted into something ugly inside me. Cameras not that never blinked kind I'd always chased. At night, but a suffocating I lay awake listening to other patients cry, laugh, still scream. I nodded. Fear concentrated in one place, recycled I told myself Jacko had been reckless. I felt it immediately. I told myself horror attracts unstable not people. Loud. I told myself this was still just a story. But present. The forest reopened the next night. Through wiring, attendants hung beneath the building silence. People love blood when it's close enough to feel real but far enough to deny responsibility. It had already been here. They came whispering Jacko's name, daring each other to touch the tree where he died. It adapts to whatever space contains R.I.P. Jacko on the bathroom wall. On the third night, a man in the room across the hall started pounding on his door, screaming that something was growing out of his mattress. Cells, he said. Nurses restrained him. They added a new attraction near Checkpoint D. When they dragged him past my room, his eyes met mine. A prop body twisted in the branches, he mouthed, swinging gently. The next morning, his room was empty. Pointed, laughed, cleaned. I couldn't look at it without tasting bile. I started paying attention. My shift that night was deeper. Patterns emerged. Fog patients who talked about being watched disappeared crawling faster. Over my boots. Those who claimed the building was changing, wrong, too quiet between screens, hallways stretching, like the forest was appearing where none existed, were transferred without explanation. I began to understand. Fresh footprints where no actor should be stationed. It needed containment. Trees marked with symbols I didn't recognize, slashes and circles. Asylums carved deep into bark. Places where fear is like normalized, blood, dismissed, absorbed. I radioed in. Where screams don't draw crowds, expand the trail charts. Static. I stopped resisting. Then, stick to your route. I listened. Again. In group therapy, a group of teenagers stories spread, laughing too loudly. One patient mentioned shadows moving lagged behind, staring into the trees. Another picked it up, added texture. Do you hear that? She asked me. By the end of the week, 5 people were afraid of. I said. She frowned. Someone calling my name. I didn't hear anything. But when she walked away, I did notice something else. the trees where she'd been looking were closer now. Not by much. Just enough to notice. I told myself it was the fog. Later, during a lull, I wandered toward Jacko's tree. The hanging man prop had been removed for the night, maintenance, they said. The branches above were bare. Too bare. The bark was scraped clean in long vertical lines, like something had been dragged upward. Beneath the tree, the ground was soft and churned, as if it had been dug at with bare hands. I crouched and touched the dirt. It was warm. Zach. I spun around. It was Maria, another actor. Her makeup was smeared, eyes red. "Have you seen Kyle?" she asked. "He was supposed to swap with me." "No," I said. "Radio him." She shook her head. Dead zone. We stood there, two silhouettes swallowed by fog, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a scream rose, then another. Overlapping. Too many voices. Maria grabbed my arm. "That's not on the schedule." Something cracked in the woods. A sharp, wet sound. Like bones snapping. We ran. Back near the main path, chaos had erupted. Guests were breaking character, crying, shoving, running the wrong direction. One man had fallen, clawing at his eyes, screaming that something was inside his head. Blood streamed between his fingers. I saw Dale shouting, trying to corral people, his voice thin and frantic. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. The forest exhaled. I heard footsteps all around me, slow, deliberate. Leaves crunching. Branches bending under weight that didn't rush, didn't panic. A voice whispered near my ear. "Zach." My name. Said. Perfectly. Jacko's voice. I staggered back, heart slamming. "This isn't funny," I said to the dark. "I know the rules." Laughter answered me, not human. A chorus of breaths pulling in unison. Lights flickered back on. Guests were gone. The path was empty. No screams. No running. Just fog drifting between trees that now seemed impossibly tall. Dale stared at the clearing, face drained of color. They left early," he said weakly. False alarm. But the ground told a different story. Drag marks led off the trail. Dozens of them. Some small. Some very, very large. The police returned. Again, no press. Again, explanations that made no sense. Missing persons reports started piling up. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in my car, parked at the edge of the woods, watching the tree line. At 3:17 a.m., I saw movement. The forest shifted. Not wind. Not animals. The trees leaned inward, branches knotting together, sealing paths shut. Symbols glowed faintly on bark, pulsing like slow heartbeats. And from deep within, something dragged itself closer to the road, leaving a trail in the dirt. I finally understood the truth I'd been avoiding. Markov's haunted forest wasn't creating fear anymore. It was remembering it. And whatever the forest remembered, it wanted more. By the third night, sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the forest breathing, slow, patient, ancient. Not a metaphor. A rhythm. Like something massive inhaling through roots and exhaling through leaves. When I finally did drift off, I dreamed of trees with faces pressed beneath the bark, mouths open, screaming without sound. I woke up tasting dirt. I should have quit. Anyone sane would have. But fear has gravity, and once it pulls you in deep enough, escaping feels like tearing yourself in half. I needed answers. Needed to prove this wasn't happening. Needed to believe I hadn't romanticized my way into something real. So I went back. The gate creaked open like it recognized me. The sign flickered, one bulb dead, so it read, "You won't leave." No one else seemed to notice. Dale was different. His confidence had rotted into desperation. He barked orders, rewrote schedules on the fly, replaced missing actors with temps who didn't last a full shift. When I asked about Maria and Kyle, he told me they'd moved on. "People don't just move on mid-season," I said. "They do if they're smart," he snapped. That night, Dale introduced new rules for staff. Rule 1, never leave the marked paths. Rule 2, never answer a guest who knows your name. Rule 3, if you hear a voice you recognize off-trail, do not follow it. Someone laughed nervously. Dale didn't. "You break the rules," he said, "you're on your own." I raised my hand. "Who wrote these rules?" Dale hesitated just a fraction too long. "The Forest did." The joke landed dead. My post was farther in than ever before, near an area not open to guests. No lights. No speakers. Just raw woods. The fog there wasn't artificial, it clung heavy and wet, soaking into my clothes. Minutes passed. Then hours. Time behaved strangely in the forest, stretching and folding in ways that made my head ache. My radio crackled occasionally with half-words, fragments of voices that cut out before meaning formed. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Bare. I turned, shotgun prop raised. "Trails closed," I called. A figure stood between the trees. Too tall. Limbs too long. Its outline wavered, like heat distortion. When it stepped forward, the fog bent around it instead of passing through. "Zach," it said. My blood went cold. Jacko's voice again, but wrong. Flattened. Like it was being played back through something that didn't understand tone. "I told you," the thing said, head tilting at an impossible angle, "don't trust the forest." I ran. Branches tore at me, roots rose to trip my feet. The path twisted, looping back on itself no matter which direction I took. Symbols glowed brighter now, carved into every tree, pulsing in time with that awful breathing. I burst into a clearing I didn't recognize. Dozens of people stood there. Guests. Actors. Some in costume, some in street clothes. All frozen, eyes wide, mouths open mid-scream. They were embedded in the trees, arms swallowed by bark, legs fused with roots. Faces stretched beneath wood like insects trapped in amber. They were alive. A woman's eyes followed me. Tears ran sideways into the grain. "Help us," they whispered. All at once. The ground trembled. Something vast shifted beneath the clearing. Roots rose, thick as serpents, wrapping around ankles, wrists, throats. I felt one brush my boot, warm, slick, pulsing. I screamed and yanked myself free, stumbling backward until I hit something solid. A tree. No, Dale. He stood there, face hollow, eyes sunken, hands shaking. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said. "What did you do?" I shouted. Dale laughed, a cracked, broken sound. I listened. "Years ago. This land, people used to disappear here. Long before the attraction. Long before the town. The forest feeds on fear. Always has. So you gave it more." I said, horrified. "I controlled it," he insisted. "I set boundaries. Rules. It was enough, until you people started loving it too much." The forest roared. Trees bent inward. The embedded people screamed louder, their faces warping, stretching. "It's not enough anymore," Dale whispered. "It knows we're pretending." Roots burst from the ground and wrapped around him, lifting him off his feet. He didn't fight. Just stared at me, eyes full of regret. "Run," he said as bark swallowed his mouth. I ran until my lungs burned and my vision tunneled. Somehow, I burst out past the gate, collapsing onto asphalt as dawn bled into the sky. Behind me, the forest stood still. Quiet. Innocent. By morning, Dale was reported missing. The embedded people were gone. No evidence. No clearing. Just new trees. And a fresh rule etched into the gate, deep and permanent. Once you know, you belong. I realized then the worst truth of all. The forest didn't just feed on fear. It fed on belief. And I had believed in it my whole life. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Not the police. Not my parents. Not even myself, not really. I reduced it to fragments, bad dreams, stress, exhaustion. That's how you survive after the impossible brushes up against you. You file it down until it fits inside a lie you can live with. But the forest didn't stay filed away. It came with me. The first night at home, I woke up at 2:43 a.m. with the certainty that someone was standing in my room. My heart hammered as I scanned the darkness. Nothing. Just my posters, classic horror films, masked killers frozen mid-scream, images I'd once worshipped. Now they felt like witnesses. I lay back down. Then I heard it. Leaves crunching. Not outside. Not in the distance. Inside the walls. I pressed my ear to the plaster. The sound moved, slow, deliberate steps, accompanied by that same deep, rhythmic breathing. In. Out. In. Out. Like roots dragging through soil. "Stop," I whispered. The sound stopped. Something scratched lightly from the other side of the wall. 3 slow lines. Familiar. The same slashes I'd seen carved into trees. I didn't sleep again. At school, people talked. About missing tourists. About the forest closing, temporarily. About how Markov's haunted forest was cursed. Some said it was marketing. Some said it was satanic. Others joked that it was all just another horror story. I laughed along with them, my mouth dry. In history class, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You left without saying goodbye." My stomach dropped. Another message followed. "Rules still apply." I blocked the number. It rang immediately. Then again. Then my phone went black, screen bleeding into darkness like ink soaking paper. When it turned back on, there was a photo saved to my gallery. My bedroom. Taken from inside the closet. I bolted out of class and threw up in the bathroom sink. That afternoon, I drove back to the forest. I don't know why. Maybe I thought confronting it would give me control. Maybe some part of me still wanted proof. Something tangible, something I could point to and say, "This is real, and I survived it." The gate was chained shut. Signs posted, "Closed by order of the state." The woods beyond looked ordinary in daylight. Harmless. Leaves gold and red, sunlight breaking through branches. Lies always look better in daylight. I climbed the fence. Inside, the air changed instantly. Heavier. Damp. The smell of rot underneath fallen leaves. The path I remembered was gone, replaced by a narrow trail that wound deeper than before. The forest had rearranged itself. "Just scare tactics," I muttered. "Conditioning." The words felt weak. I reached the clearing where Dale had been taken. It wasn't empty. A ring of trees surrounded a pit I didn't remember, a wide, circular depression filled with dark soil that pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. At its center stood something that made my knees buckle. The masks. Dozens of them. Jacko's burlap grin. Maria's cracked porcelain face. Animal heads, rotting latex, cracked plastic smiles. They hung from branches, swaying gently though there was no wind. Beneath them, etched into the dirt, were names. My breath caught when I saw mine. Zachary Markov. I didn't agree to this, I said, voice shaking. The forest answered. Branches bent inward. The breathing grew louder. Roots surfaced around the pit, coiling like waiting fingers. You did, a voice said, not Jacko's, not Dale's. Mine. I turned. I was standing behind myself. Same face. Same clothes. But the eyes were wrong, too dark, reflecting bark and branches instead of light. You loved it, it said. The screams. The blood. The idea that fear was beautiful because it wasn't happening to you. That's not true, I said, backing away. My double smiled. You watched until it was real. That's how belief works. The ground shifted beneath my feet. I stumbled, barely catching myself before falling into the pit. From its depths came whispers, hundreds of voices layered together, begging, laughing, screaming. Fear wants witnesses, my double said. And now you see. Roots wrapped around my ankles. Cold. Wet. Alive. No, I sobbed. I don't want this. The forest hesitated. For the first time, I felt it listening. I tore my gaze away from my double and looked at the masks, at the names, at the truth carved into dirt and bark. I don't believe in you anymore, I said, forcing the words out. You're not art. You're not entertainment. You're just hunger. The roots loosened. My double screamed. Not in anger, but in terror, as his body stiffened, bark crawling over his skin. The forest pulled him backward, merging him into the trees, his face stretching beneathward like the others. I ran. This time, the forest let me go. At home, I burned my posters. Every movie. Every mask. I deleted my collections, wiped my hard drives clean. I stopped watching. Stopped feeding it. The breathing in the walls faded. But some nights, when the house is quiet, I still hear leaves crunching just outside my window. Waiting. Because belief doesn't die easily. And the forest never forgets those who almost belong to it. I thought starving the forest would end it. I was wrong. Hunger doesn't disappear when it isn't fed, it sharpens. Weeks passed. Markov's haunted forest remained closed, swallowed by yellow tape and legal language. The town relaxed. New stories replaced old ones. People moved on the way people always do when terror becomes inconvenient. I didn't. The silence around me felt artificial, like a held breath that would eventually break. I stopped dreaming, which was worse than nightmares. Sleep came in shallow fragments, and when I woke, my body felt heavy, as if roots had grown through my bones overnight. The forest had stopped chasing me. Instead, it was studying me. It started with sounds. Not leaves or branches, voices. Familiar ones. My mother calling me for dinner when she was in the same room. A classmate whispering my name from behind lockers when no one was there. Each time I reacted, the voice learned. Improved. Got closer. Then came the smells. Wet earth in the hallway. Rotting wood in my backpack. Sap on my hands when I woke up, sticky and amber, impossible to wash off completely. It lingered under my fingernails, a reminder. I avoided mirrors after the first time I noticed bark-like lines spreading faintly along my wrists, thin and vein-like. They faded during the day. Returned at night. The forest was rehearsing. One evening, my phone buzzed with a news alert. State to reopen Markov land for private sale. My chest tightened. Private sale meant secrecy. It meant control. Someone was going to own the forest, and ownership was just another form of permission. That night, I heard the breathing again. Not in the walls. In my chest. Each inhale felt too deep, too slow. Each exhale carried a faint whisper, like leaves rubbing together. I clutched my shirt, gasping, panic spiraling. Then the words formed. Come back. I fell to my knees. No, I whispered. I don't believe. The forest didn't argue. It showed me. My bedroom dissolved, not visually, but conceptually. The walls felt thin, transparent, like paper soaked in rain. Through them, I sensed others. Dozens. Hundreds. People who had visited. Who had watched. Who had screamed and laughed and filmed and shared. The forest wasn't tied to land anymore. It had learned something from us. Fear didn't need trees. Fear needed attention. I saw flashes. Suburban houses with roots breaking through basements, parks where bark split open beneath playgrounds, trails appearing overnight in places that had never been wooded before. The forest wasn't expanding. It was migrating. And it was using me as a mouth. I woke up the next morning with dirt on my tongue. At school, people stared. Whispers followed me down the hall. A girl fainted when I passed her. A teacher dropped his coffee, hands shaking, eyes fixed on my shadow. Which wasn't moving the way it should. In the bathroom mirror, I saw it. When I blinked, my reflection didn't. Behind my eyes, something vast shifted, pressing forward, curious. You're good at this, the voice said gently. You understand us. I hate you, I said aloud. Hate is attention. That afternoon, I found a message carved into the desk in my last period classroom. Fresh. Deep. You are the trail now. I ran. I didn't know where I was going until I was there. The forest's edge. Even closed, even fenced, it felt closer than before, like it had leaned toward town while no one was watching. Trees stood thicker near the road, branches tangled, blocking sight lines. The air buzzed faintly, alive with expectation. I didn't cross the fence this time. I won't be part of this, I said, voice shaking but loud. Find someone else. The forest answered not with force, but with truth. Images flooded my mind. People filming fake hauntings. Kids chasing scares online. Comment sections demanding more real fear. View counts climbing. Violence aestheticized. Suffering consumed. You don't need me, I whispered. You already have them. The forest paused. For the first time, I felt uncertainty ripple through it. Then understanding. We will grow, it said. But you. The pressure in my chest intensified. My knees buckled. You will guide. No, I cried. Witnesses become paths, the forest said. Paths become forests. Roots surged up around the fence, cracking asphalt. Trees leaned inward, forming an arch, not physical, but perceptual. A doorway only I could see. I made a choice then. Not a brave one. Not a clean one. A necessary one. I turned my back on the forest and screamed. Not in fear, but in warning. I screamed until my throat tore, until people gathered, until cameras came out, until the attention shifted away from the trees and onto me. I became the spectacle. By the time authorities arrived, the forest had gone still again. Ordinary. Silent. Innocent. They took me away in an ambulance. As they strapped me down, sedated me, labeled me, I felt the forest recede, not gone, but distanced. Watching through others now. Waiting for belief to return. As the doors closed, one final whisper brushed my mind. You bought them time. I don't know how much. But I know this. The haunted forest no longer needs woods. And one day, when the world gets bored again, it will remember how to grow. They called it a breakdown. That word followed me everywhere, whispered by nurses, scribbled into files, spoken gently by doctors who never met my eyes. Acute stress reaction. Hallucinations. Trauma-induced delusion. They wrapped what happened in language designed to make it smaller, safer, something that could be medicated and monitored. I let them. Because if I told the truth, that the forest was real, that it was learning, that it had learned through us, they would have called it something worse. They kept me for observation. White walls. Locked doors. Cameras that never blinked. At night, I lay awake listening to other patients cry, laugh, scream. Fear concentrated in one place, recycled endlessly. I felt it immediately. The breathing. Not loud. Not obvious. But present. Moving through vents, through wiring, through the subtle hum beneath the building's silence. The forest hadn't followed me here. It had already been here. Fear doesn't rot. It doesn't fade. It adapts to whatever space contains it. On the third night, a man in the room across the hall started pounding on his door, screaming that something was growing out of his mattress. Nurses restrained him. Sedated him. When they dragged him past my room, his eyes met mine. "Roots," he mouthed. The next morning, his room was empty. Cleaned. Reset. I started paying attention. Patterns emerged. Patients who talked about being watched disappeared faster. Those who claimed the building was changing. Hallways stretching, doors appearing where none existed, were transferred without explanation. I began to understand. The forest didn't need belief anymore. It needed containment. Hospitals. Prisons. Asylums. Places where fear is normalized, dismissed, absorbed. Where screams don't draw crowds, just charts. I stopped resisting. Instead, I listened. In group therapy, I watched how stories spread. One patient mentioned shadows moving wrong. Another picked it up, added texture. By the end of the week, 5 people were afraid of the same corner of the room. That corner grew darker. The forest wasn't creating fear here. It was cultivating it. And slowly, horrifyingly, I realized why I was still alive. I wasn't the trail anymore. I was the map. One night, the lights went out during a storm. Emergency power hummed on, casting everything in sickly red. The air thickened, heavy with that familiar scent of damp earth. The wall across from my bed rippled. Not visually, structurally. Like something pressing from the other side, testing for weakness. The paint cracked, lines spreading outward in patterns I knew by heart. 3 slashes. A circle. A rule. My chest tightened. I warned them, I whispered. I did what you wanted. The wall bulged further. You did what you could, the forest answered, not as a voice, but as a sensation. Pressure behind my eyes. Weight in my lungs. But fear always finds shelter. The surface split. Not open, thin. Through it, I saw trees. Not the haunted forest as it was, but as it wanted to be. Endless. Interwoven with buildings, streets, bedrooms, screens. Roots threaded through foundations and nervous systems alike. People stood among the trees, holding phones, filming. Smiling. Commenting. The forest pulsed with approval. You don't need me, I said weakly. You're everywhere. We need witnesses, it replied. But we need warnings too. Something pushed forward through the thinning wall. Not a creature. A memory. Jacko's grin. Maria's scream. Dale's hollow eyes. All of it surged into me at once, sharp and suffocating. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, nails scraping tile. I understood then. The forest didn't just feed on fear. It fed on stories. And stories needed endings. The next morning, I was released. Cleared. Stabilized. Low risk, they said. No danger to self or others. They handed me pamphlets and wished me luck. As I walked out, I passed a waiting room full of people staring at their phones. Watching clips. Jump scares. Pranks gone wrong. Real violence framed. Like entertainment. The air around them felt warm. Alive. That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in months. My hands shook as I typed. I didn't write about monsters. Or curses. Or haunted attractions. I wrote about consequences. I wrote about a forest that grows wherever fear is consumed without care. A place that stops pretending when we stop respecting the difference between fiction and flesh. I wrote until dawn. The story spread faster than I expected. People called it disturbing. Uncomfortable. Too real. Some accused me of exaggeration. Others said they couldn't sleep after reading it. Good. Every warning carries a cost. As the sun rose, I felt the forest stir, restless, irritated. It didn't like this version of the story. Didn't like being named for what it was. Careful, it whispered. You're still connected. I know, I replied softly. That's why this matters. Outside, wind moved through ordinary trees, leaves rustling. For the first time in a long while, the sound didn't feel like breathing. It felt like listening. But fear never starves completely. It only waits. And I knew, deep in my bones, that if my warning failed, the forest would write the ending itself. The story didn't stop it. I think, deep down, I always knew it wouldn't. Warnings never end hunger, they just teach it patience. At first, the attention felt like victory. My words spread across forums, comment sections, late-night podcasts. People debated whether it was fiction or confession. Some praised it as psychological horror. Others called it a cry for help. A few, too few, understood. They were the quiet ones. The ones who stopped watching certain videos. Who avoided haunted attractions. Who flinched when fear felt too real. The forest noticed them immediately. Fear doesn't want to be rejected. It wants to be chased. The symptoms returned slowly. Not violently, politely. Subtle pressure behind my eyes. The faint scent of soil when I typed too long. Dreams where I stood at the edge of a clearing, watching trees grow out of buildings like tumors. The forest never spoke directly anymore. It didn't need to. Every night, I watched new trails form online. Viral clips of real hauntings. Live streams from abandoned places where people vanished mid-broadcast. Comment sections demanding proof. Demanding blood. The forest had learned scale. It no longer needed one place. It needed an ending. I felt it the night the email arrived. No sender. No subject. Just coordinates. I stared at the numbers for a long time before understanding. Markov's land. They were reopening it. Not as an attraction. As a memorial park. Nature reclaimed, the announcement said. A place of reflection. I laughed until I cried. Reflection was exactly what the forest wanted. I drove there at dusk. The fence was gone. The tape removed. New signs stood at the entrance, clean and tasteful. The trees beyond looked calm, bathed in gold light, leaves whispering gently. So many people had gathered. Families. Couples. Influencers filming slow pans, smiling softly, pretending the ground beneath them wasn't layered with bones and belief. They walked the edge but didn't enter. Not yet. I stepped past the sign. The air thickened instantly. The breathing returned, not loud, but vast, surrounding me from every direction. The paths rearranged themselves, guiding me inward with the inevitability of gravity. "You're late," the forest said, not in words, but in understanding. "I came to finish it," I replied. The clearing opened before me, wider than ever. The pit was gone. In its place stood a massive tree, ancient and swollen, bark split with faces just beneath the surface. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All watching. "You don't need me," I said. "You've already won." The forest pulsed. "Victory is an ending," it answered. "And endings require witnesses." The crowd at the edge of the woods stirred. Phones lifted. Someone crossed the line. Then another. Fear rippled outward, curiosity tipping into unease, unease into thrill. The forest drank deeply. "You could stop," I said. "Let them leave." "They don't want to leave," it replied. "Neither did you." Roots rose from the ground, not trapping, inviting. Paths formed naturally, gently. People followed without realizing they'd made a choice. That was the most horrifying part. No force. Just permission. I stepped closer to the tree and pressed my hand to its bark. It was warm. Alive. Familiar. "I'll stay," I said quietly. "If that's what it takes. Anchor yourself to me. Not them." The forest hesitated. For the first time since this began, I felt doubt ripple through it, true uncertainty. I wasn't offering fear. I wasn't offering belief. I was offering responsibility. "You would be rude and warning," it said. "Bound and remembered." Yes. The crowd gasped as the ground trembled. Some screamed. Some laughed. Cameras shook violently as branches twisted inward, blocking exits, not closing them, just making them harder to see. I felt the bark climb my legs, my torso, my chest. Not painful. Intimate. Like being folded into something vast. My vision blurred, then sharpened beyond human limits. I saw fear as it truly was. Not screams or blood, but attention. Focus. Hunger sharpened into form. As my body fused with the tree, my face pressed beneath the bark, half visible, half erased. I could feel every root, every branch, every whisper of dread passing through the forest's expanding mind. I became the ending. The crowd fled. Most of them. Enough. By morning, the forest stood quiet again. Ordinary. Peaceful. Authorities called it a natural phenomenon. An isolated incident. A mass hallucination. They fenced it off. Again. But this time, something was different. When people approached the edge, they felt watched, not hunted, not tempted. Warned. Stories began to change. Videos lost their thrill. Fear felt heavier, less fun. More costly. I remain here. I feel the world beyond the roots. I feel new forests trying to grow, online, in whispers, in the dark corners of human curiosity. I push back where I can. I remind it. Fear without care creates monsters. Fear understood becomes a boundary. If you ever walk near a quiet forest and feel an inexplicable urge to turn back, listen. That's not cowardice. That's me. Still watching. Still warning. Because the haunted forest never truly dies. It only waits for someone else to believe in it again.